Hello, so today I want to cover another augment that I really enjoy and one that I think is one of the best augments in set 15 to play flexibly and to play really aggressive tempo, and that is Worth the Wait. Worth the Wait, you basically get a 2-star 1-cost champion, and then every round after 2 rounds, you will gain another copy of them for the rest of the game. This often has a lot of different implications, but we're going to go over it. I'm going to give you some tips on it, like when you want to hold on to those units, how you can play around it, some extra little tips, and additionally, I'm also going to do a little tier list about how much I think, or how good I think each of the 1-costs are if you get them in Worth the Wait. But either way, if you like my content, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm kind of going through some of these guides, talked about specific augments that I really like, just to give a little bit more information about the set. If there's a guide that you think I missed, and I haven't done one and you want to see me talk about something, also comment below, because I'm looking for some extra ideas to do as the set kind of closes down, because I kind of covered a lot of the main points, and I'm now just breaking down some more niche examples. But either way, with Worth the Wait, the idea behind it is that you're going to get a 1-cost unit, and that unit, you're going to keep getting them every single round until you hit an eventual 3-star. Additionally, you can also go for a 4-star, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but basically, because you keep getting copies of these for the rest of the game, if you basically assemble 3-star units, there's a new mechanic that was added a couple sets ago, where you can get a 4-star unit, which is even more juicy and powerful and strong and has more scaling. But for the most intensive purposes, you're going to be playing around a 3-star unit that you're going to get early in the game. If you don't find any extra copies of the unit while you're just waiting for Worth the Wait to kick in, a lot of times you'll hit this unit early on stage 3, which often puts you in a really strong spot for stage 3. And because you also start with a 2-star 1-cost champion, you're often in a good spot on stage 2. So this is a great augment to just be really strong early, as well as to save a lot of HP. And saving HP, in my opinion, is one of the most important things to do in set 15, because there's so many different win conditions, right? A random Katarina player can hit some insane scaling, or they can randomly get a radiant item like Radiant Hodge, or an Orn artifact like Dawn Core, and then all of a sudden they're unbeatable and they just instantly win. Another person can just randomly hit a Yone, and then all of a sudden they're 7 mech and they just instantly win, because that's a win condition as well, right? Somebody could be playing something like Kog'Maw, and they can easily just hit a Dawn Core as well. They just rip an artifact, and all of a sudden they go from a pretty mediocre average spot to a game-winning spot just off the roll of a dice, it seems like, right? That's something that exists a lot with set 15, and a lot of it is tied between power-ups as well. There's a lot of power-ups that are very specific and bring out the full potential of a unit, so a lot of set 15 revolves around having particular strong units that stack with really good items and really good power-ups, such to a point where they're overbearing and really powerful, and it's basically your Giga unit against somebody else's Giga unit, because that's part of how the set 15 fruit mechanic or power-up mechanic kind of plays into effect. And almost every patch, there's some broken fruit on some broken unit that makes things really hard for all the other comps in the game. Well, how can you avoid all of these problems? I'm obviously complaining a little bit about set 15, but something that's really great is when you have an augment that puts you in an advantage early in the game. With Worth the Wait, you basically guarantee yourself a 3-star unit without having to invest any gold into the unit. A 3-star unit has great scaling. You can scale really well with a scaling fruit or a scaling power-up. If you get a tank, you can take max vitality. Now you have a 3-star 1-cost that's already strong early, and you can scale that unit into late game and be relatively strong in your later game scenarios. Additionally, even if you're not taking a scaling fruit, you can even just take any fruit, because if you have a 3-star unit that is particularly strong, or you can support with either other synergies or other augments, then having a power-up will just juice up that one unit. In a set where you're trying to find all the situations of items, augments, power-ups, fruits, and you're trying to put it all together to make a Giga Juice unit, it helps to have a building block that you just get instantly, that you can use as either an early game item holder up until you get to your end game, or you can just have like in the back as an extra unit that can be something to strengthen your board, especially to give you those HP advantages, so you can have the ability to decide later what you can do to convert that into a top 4. So Worth the Wait, for all intents and purposes, I love it. I think it's really great, but a lot of it is based around the fruit mechanic this set and the 1-cost themselves. Let's start getting into ranking some of these 1-costs. When you think about the 1-costs, there are actually a lot of them that put you in an insane spot for an actual win condition, right? For example, Crew and Kale. Kale is a unit where ideally, if you can just have a Kale and teleport to 9, that's a great thing. Hitting Worth the Wait Kale is very great. It's just, I don't know how else to put it. It's one of the greatest things ever, because Kale, you just want to make it to level 9. So if you can just not have to roll any gold, convert all of that gold into pushing levels, and you just get a free 3-star Kale, you can make it to level 9 and have a Kale that just hits like a truck, and usually convert that into a nice reliable top 4. Additionally, Kale powers up really nicely by pushing levels. So if you just are able to be level 6, you get a huge power spike. If you get a fruit for Kale that helps her to scale, like either Final Ascent, where, you know, you make it to level 7, level 10, you get extra power-ups, or over 9,000, or Max Arcana, anything that scales the Kale, you also have a really good spot, because she's going to be a threat once you make it to level 9. She's going to be as good as an expensive unit if you have a 3-star Kale on level 9, which is really nice. Additionally, crew. Right, a big part about playing crew is that you want to hit your 3 stars really fast because of the first crew bonus. The first crew bonus is that you get 1 XP per paid reroll. That's basically like 1 gold per round, or 1 gold per reroll, which essentially you could kind of think of it, it's a little bit donkey math, but you can kind of think of it like your rerolls are costing only 1 gold instead of 2 gold, because like part of that gold that you're spending is going towards EXP. That's really important because crew, you want to 3-star everybody, and has win conditions. You can actually win out with crew, especially if you hit a Twisted Fate, or you high roll into a Twisted Fate. You're playing around Shen 3, Ziggs 3, it's actually really good, right? Ziggs got buffed to a point where you hit a Ziggs 3, you can often convert it into a top 4. So having a free 3-star early on with crew puts you in a really good spot to just be able to get to those higher cap potential, because you're able to push levels as you're rolling with the crew bonus. So having that crew bonus active is really strong. So if I have to rank these ones, right, if we're thinking about the Giga S tier 1 cost, we have 3 wonderful examples of win conditions. So already, all the stuff that I talked about with worth the wait, these are all great things, right? I already talked about you can play at tempo, it gives you a good spot, it's great in set 15, but one of the big parts is that there are win condition 1 costs. These are literally, you hit worth the wait on any of these, you're looking around and you got a big grin on your face because it's probably going to be a pretty easy game for you. You might not necessarily win the game, there's obviously other people can hit their win conditions, this isn't the strongest of win conditions, but it's something that puts you in an insane spot. It's an insane high roll, and you can often convert this into a pretty reliable top 4. Next, we can think about all the other 1 costs in the game. There's a lot of 1 costs that have really good effects based on their traits and their synergies. One example is Mech. Mech right now is a really, really big comp that everybody wants to play around, and Mech usually requires one of 2 things. You either require a lot of gold and tempo early game, which worth the wait gives you. You get the units that allow you to streak or be really strong if you hit a Mech unit. And additionally, you want to eventually make it to 7 mech such that you're eating the units and then making like the whole mech pilot synergy workout, right? Mech pilot right now, this is one of the strongest comps in the game. It's a bit of a Yone check, so it makes it really hard to play around, but usually you're just trying to get to 7 mech, play your mech units, and then just call it a day. And usually this is like a comp that can actually go first. It's like the most broken comp in the game currently. So when you hit one of these units, they make great cannon fodder for the mech. As a 3-star unit, the mech is going to get a lot of extra value off eating these units, which actually puts you in a really good mech spot. Additionally, if you have one of the mech units and you're able to streak in your early game, you have an insanely good spot, because if you're streaking your early game, then you can often either decide to fast 9 later, which makes it easier to hit the Yone and to play mech, or you'll just have a lot of gold and a lot of HP that you can have the time to find the Yone. You're not just like, you know, playing with 1 life, hoping that you hit a Yone in 1 roll, and hoping that if you don't hit it, you just go 8th or you go 1st, and it's like this huge mess, which usually happens with mech. If you start the game off and you're just win streaking and you have a lot of gold and a lot of HP, it doesn't matter. You have tons of time to find the Yone, right? If things go wrong, if you miss it on the first roll down, you can rebuild your econ and go for a second roll down. That's the glory of being in a strong spot early game. So all of those ones, right? Mech units as well, really great. So I think Lucian is one of the best backline carries as well. So of the backline carries, he's definitely a great one to hit because he has a lot of synergies. Lucian also has an ability, right? He also has a fruit if you really want to talk about it. Right, if you want to do something, you can even go Drift Duo, right? You could go Drift Now, this one's a little bit more of a meme, because it's a little bit harder to hit the Senna 3, especially when everybody's playing Mech. But before, when Mech wasn't very popular, he was great for Drift Duo, because then you could just get to 7 Mighty Mech, because you just push levels and then roll for Senna. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a reason I wouldn't do this if I were you guys. I would just go for push levels and play around 7 mech trying to find the Yone. I think this is going to be way harder because, like I said, everybody holds on to Senna, but it's just something to keep in mind if there's balancing later around some of the other boards. But either way, those are all A tier. But I'll go as far as to say that a lot of these other units are also A tier. Having a 1-cost tank is really reliable. Right now, having a really strong front line is really good because there's a lot of units that can play into flexible backlines late game, right? You have 5 costs such as Twisted Fate and Zyra and even Lee Sin in some cases if you have Juggernauts. All of these are really strong and potent backline carries, and a lot of times you're playing either around something like Juggernauts, right, where you're playing Vertical Juggernaut, or you're playing around Vertical Bastion, where you're playing all of the Bastion units. Both of these make great cases for just hitting random 1-cost units, right? Nefiri is an extremely strong unit. Just really capable of streaking and really good with melee style items. This can put you in a great spot to just play around Juggernauts and then eventually make it to either Volibear or Lee Sin. Bastion units are also extremely strong. They have great scaling, because if you don't know, Bastions give armor and MR, and when you 3-star a unit, they get a big chunk of HP. That's like a big part of their scaling. They don't scale a lot. They scale their abilities, they scale other stuff, sure, but one of the main stats they get is HP. So when you have a Bastion unit and you 3-star it, it gains HP and it has a lot of armor. That's a really strong tank now, because you have 2 of the main tank stats. You have a huge amount of HP that you can soak up damage with, and a huge amount of resistances if you're playing around Bastions, which makes so you don't take as much damage. So Bastion units are also incredibly strong. Garen even has scaling. If you can get Garen and activate some Battle Academia, you can juice this guy's HP so that he's actually a threat late game that he's hard to basically chew through or hard to kill, because he'll have like an infinite amount of HP. So all of these units, even though they might not have the most obvious win conditions, I'd be happy with any of them. Even Zac. Zac's a heavyweight. He scales great with HP. Heavyweights gain extra HP. This is great. All of these units are really easy, and I would be happy seeing any of them. Very, very much so, right? Above average, I would say these are all great. And that's a big part of why Worth the Wait is so good. Because outside of the win condition units, you also have a variety of tanks that you can easily hit and play around. So I mentioned some scaling on the units as well. If you want to know how scaling works, this is the star level scaling for 1, 2, 3, and 4 cost units. If we're looking at just the stat scaling, basically you get base HP and your base AD scaling. So typically AD units or units that like HP and AD are ones that work a little bit better, especially if you're scaling them up to 3-star, but this is outside of them upgrading their abilities. Obviously, right? Like, I'm not saying that, you know, Lucian is a bad unit because he doesn't scale off AD well. It's like his ability will scale, right? The reason ability doesn't scale is because they have their upgraded ability, right? Like, as you can see, his damage will increase from 130 to 225, like on his 3-star ability, and he'll regenerate more mana. He'll get a larger mana refund when he's 3-starred. So obviously he gets like that type of scaling. But usually with these units, especially if they're a frontline unit, they get the HP scaling. That's what's really important. Getting the extra HP scaling is really nice, and that usually helps you to be a much more reliable and stronger tank, because you just can absorb and soak up more damage. But now, let's think about some of the remaining units, right? What other units are there? I think in terms of like damage units, I think Syndra, Gnar, and I think even Kennen could be up in A tier. It's hard to rank him because it's been a while. They just buffed him as his tank. I'll put him in B tier for now, but he could easily be up here because he's a protector tank. He could obviously be really strong, and he has a stun. I just find these a little bit less tanky than some of the other units, so I usually put him around here. And then even Callista. Callista has great scaling because Callista can easily like snipe units. But these ones I would say are more average. When you see these ones, they're usually, you can play around them, but it's not something that's like super crazy. And then Ezreal I think is the hardest to play around. I usually put Ezreal a tier below everything else. And this would be my tier list for worth the wait units. And of course you can debate, you can say that it's different. You can have success with any of these units. I'm just saying raw, you see this unit, how happy am I? These are the ones I'm the most happy about, and these are the ones I'm less happy about. Which, as you can see, there's not a lot of them, and B tier is totally fine, right? When I say B tier, I mean these are average. Like, I see them, I say, this is fine, I can work with this, right? That's my B tier. My B tier is, I can work with this. The only one that I think is a little bit shitty is Ezreal, but that's just because of maybe past experiences. I got Ezreal before, and it was a little bit hard to play around him. He can even be higher, maybe. But I'm just saying, of the worth the wait units, a lot of them make great use cases. Either a reliable front line that you can play into a reroll line, or some sort of backline that gives you good tempo and good damage, because a lot of these one costs are really strong. Even Syndra, she has Rising Chaos. She can be really strong. It's just a little bit harder to play around her now, because even Rising Chaos Syndra, she's not really going to chew through some of the meta comps, like the mechs and the really heavy front lines. That's the only reason I don't put her in A tier. But overall, a lot of great hits. A lot of great hits. But let's talk about something else, right? Another part of worth the wait, obviously, is chasing the 4-star, right? With the 4-star, usually you just wait for an entirety of the game in order to get your 4-star unit. Getting the 4-star unit is often difficult because you do have to hit another 3-star and another 3-star. This usually requires an extra 18 rounds, right? You need 9 rounds of worth the wait to activate in order to get these 2 3-stars, which will then eventually combine with your 3-star on board to make a 4-star. With these units, I think it's a little bit of a bait sometimes, because if we go back to the scaling is mostly on HP. It's not really scaling everything. So unless you're really hoping to have like a tank that does a lot of damage, the chances are the scaling is not worth it. So a lot of times the 4-star could be a little bit of bait if it's not a frontline unit. Now the frontline units obviously have great scaling because the 4-star will juice their HP quite a bit. So that's obviously something to work with. But typically speaking, 4-star is often where things get a little bit stressful with this augment. One thing I always like to mention when I think about this augment is the fact that you can treat it like an econ augment. In the past, if you didn't see a good worth the wait unit, basically the way you can treat it is like 1 gold per round, right? If you think about Raining Gold is another gold augment. So this should be equal power level. As you can see, you get 8 gold and then 1 gold every round. It's very similar, right? If you just sell your unit every single round, you're basically getting a Raining Gold as a gold augment, except you also just get it in the form of a champion. Now, obviously, you don't get the starting gold, which is a big portion of why you would take Raining Gold in the first place, but this augment is also just like giving you 1 gold per round. So a lot of times, if you hit your 3-star unit, if you're not close to hitting the 4-star, so if you didn't natural a couple copies, if you didn't find some extra copies of the unit in your shop, and you're just relying on worth the wait to hit the 3-star, then it's going to be really long until you hit it, right? If you don't find any copies in your shop, you're probably only going to hit your 4-star close to the end of stage 5, which is usually when the game is over anyways, so it doesn't really matter in most cases. Either you're going to lose before then, or you're going to be strong enough that you're winning before then. So a lot of times what I always recommend is just selling the unit, right? 1 gold per round is insane, right? After you hit your 3-star, you can just push this gold. You can just use it every single turn, but sell it, and use that to just keep your econ high. You can continue to push levels, continue to have tempo, because you essentially have an econ generating augment, but you also have the benefit of a really strong unit that you can play around, which is nice. That's like one of the big parts of it. So my recommendation is always, when you see the unit and you're going for the 4-star, if you didn't find, I would say bare minimum, if you didn't find 3 copies of the unit ahead of time, I would just use the units as gold to push levels. Now, obviously, if it's a backline unit, it makes a little bit more sense to sell as well, just because the scaling is primarily on HP and AD. But at the same time, some units really like this, right? Like Kale, for example, would love these stats anyways, because she just stays alive and she 1v9s anyways. But either way, don't get baited too much into holding on to the units. Try and use the gold in order to keep yourself in a good spot and keep yourself ahead of tempo, because often the 4-star can be a little bit bait because you hit it and it doesn't necessarily like make things super crazy. This is something I see a lot with Worth the Wait 2, right? Worth the Wait 2 is the prismatic where you get a 2-cost champion. There's a lot of times where I see people do Worth the Wait with a 2-cost champion, and then they're like complaining that their 2-cost 4-star didn't do enough damage, and it's like, yeah, it really only scales HP, right? It doesn't really scale the rest of the stuff. It scales mostly just their HP. So if it's like, you know, that's like one of the key factors that comes into play, especially if you don't have a frontline tank in the form of Worth the Wait. But either way, through the fruits, that just gives you a really good spot, and you can often be really strong and scale really well with the fruits early game. Even if you're not taking a scaling fruit, just having a fruit on a 3-star unit is going to be really strong, right? Just like a tank fruit, even the most basic of things, that unit's hard to deal with, so you get more effects of your fruit proccing more often, or you're able to make better use of the fruit because you have more stats being a 3-star unit. But then also, there are a lot of them that I think are just generally good. all the front lines are good, you have win condition ones, and then even the ones that are bad are situationally very good, right? Callista can easily scam any fight, right? She's hard to play around because her itemization might be a bit weird, but trust me, she could just one tap a backline unit. If you're going up against a backline unit and the Callista just one taps them, you just win the fight anyways, right? All of these units have potential and have the capabilities of being strong, and that's a big testament to the balancing of the one cost being fairly good. A lot of the one costs are good at doing their jobs. They're not necessarily the most broken, not necessarily the craziest late game, but they all could kind of do what they have to do, which is great, because it makes something like Worth the Wait a lot better. But anyways, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Hopefully there were some tips there and some information that made things a little bit better. If you want to know the website for the scaling, this is Little Buddy Bot. It basically has most of the information that you can have for the set, different augments, different other stuff. I always shout it out because I use it quite a bit, especially when I'm doing these illustrative examples. But it's on other info, and then you have TFT star scaling, and then obviously the 5 costs have like a way better scaling because they're like instant wins supposed to be. But anyways, thanks for watching, have a great day, and see ya, bye bye.